Hello, everyone, and welcome to Africa Fire Mission's weekly virtual training session. My name is Mike, and I'm the programs director here at Africa Fire Mission. We're so happy that you took time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's training. Today, we're joined by Brian Andersen. Brian's led a couple trainings for us already this year. Uh, does a lot of volunteer work for us here at Africa Fire Mission. He's traveled with us in the past to do in-person training. Those of you that are in Zambia will get to see him in October when we do some in-person training in Zambia. So really blessed to have Brian here today, leading us on today's discussion, where he's going to do kind of a review of some we call historical fires and some lessons learned from those. I was pretty excited about that. Before we get started with today's training, let me just touch on a couple of administrative items for you. If you stick around for at least 70% of today's training, which is usually about 40 or 45 minutes, you'll get a certificate of attendance for today's class. If your network drops or you've got to leave for a fire call, whatever happens there and you get cut off, there are some options to earn that certificate. If you head over to our webpage at www.africafiremission.org, go to the resources tab, and under training materials, you'll be able to find a link to our Google Drive folder that has recordings of today's class as well as all of our other classes that we've taught so far this year. If you watch the video and answer a couple questions to let us know that you watched the video all the way through to the end, I can get you a certificate of attendance for that class as well. So please feel free to take advantage of that resource. Uh, when we get finished here with our training at the top of the hour, we're going to transition into our tea time. Tea time is a time where you can ask more questions, do a little bit deeper dive into today's topic, as well as a place where you can just network with firefighters from throughout Africa. You can see already here in the chat, we've got some folks from the Middle East, from Kenya, from Zambia, from Malawi. So great time to do some networking and talk about how things are happening throughout other parts of Africa. So encourage, if you've got the time and the bundles, to stick around for that as well. At this point in time, I'm going to pass things over to my friend Brian here to get us started with today's training.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Glad to be back. Yeah, today we're going to talk about some historical fires. So, maybe. There we go. So there's a book called 30 Fires You Must Know. I personally haven't read the book. It's on my to-read list, but my to-read list is already 2 years long, probably. But it talks a lot about how major fires impacted the fire service. So this is my variation on that book. I've just read the summary of the book. I haven't read the book, but it's fires that have shaped the fire service, at least in my perspective. So a little about me to start off with. My name is Brian Andersen. I started firefighting in 2004 and have been with Africa Fire Mission since 2019. I went to Kenya. I'm pretty excited to go to Zambia here in a few weeks when we go there in October. Um, I have a master's degree of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. For a career, I work as a safety coordinator in the oil field, overseeing all the safety aspects of hydraulic fracking and stuff. But I volunteer as a training officer for Belva Fire and Rescue in Belva, North Dakota, along with a whole bunch of other volunteer opportunities. So today we're going to understand the circumstances and the challenges faced during each fire, analyze how those events led to changes in the fire service, maybe through changes of standards, better equipment, or better training. We'll reflect on some of the human stories behind the stats. Um, and we'll also use these case studies to enhance our decision making on the fire ground. You'll be able to better lead a emergency scene by having some historical data behind you. The first fire we're going to talk about is unique. It's the deadliest wildfire in US history, and it's almost never talked about. And we didn't learn anything from it. The only thing we've really done from this fire is during World War II, the United States Army analyzed this fire to figure out how to make our fire bombings of Dresden, Germany, and Tokyo, Japan, more deadly, unfortunately. So this Pestigo fire of 1871, like I said, deadliest wildfire in U.S. history. There's really no lessons learned about it, why it started. It still debates. There's theories. Um, we didn't understand the fire behavior from it. We didn't learn from it. It was said that the rivers and streams were boiling of water because this fire was so hot. Yeah, killed 1,500 people. Extremely deadly fire. And all we did is, you know, 50 years, 60 years later, we started studying the wildfire behaviors so we can understand what weather we need to bomb our enemies with. And that's not exactly what we want to do with these fires as we're learning about them, right? We want to figure out why these fires started, why they spread the way they spread, and why there was fatalities, so we can save lives. Unfortunately, that's not what happened with this largest wildfire in U.S. history. Part of the reason why this fire is not real well known, even though it's so deadly, is because it happened the exact same day as our next fire, the Great Chicago Fire. We all hear this story, you know, the legend of the cow kicking over the candle or the lantern and burning the bar down or the barn down, right? Um, Killed hundreds of people, didn't kill near as many, killed only a fraction of what was killed in that wildland fire. But this is the one that got all the headlines. Destroyed much of Chicago, killed hundreds, left thousands of people homeless. And this was the first fire in US history where we started changing something to prevent it in the future. They started doing urban fire prevention, better planning. When they rebuilt, they started building things that were more fire resistant. They included building codes, nowhere close to the quality of building codes we have now, at least in the US. Um, and it really started Chicago's transformation of the fire department into being a modern fire department with high levels of training and really good equipment. So we learn about this fire all the time. You know, that this is why we have Fire Prevention Week when we have Fire Prevention Week, because Fire Prevention Week is always the week with October 9th in it to pay tribute to this fire that was burning on October 9th, right? So we actually learned some things from this one. So we're in the right direction, at least, where we're studying these fires, we're figuring out how or why people died, and we're learning from it. And that's a really good start. This is the first time we really see that in the United States history. Now, this next fire happened in Chicago also. Our Lady of the Angels School Fire. Now, this fire killed 92 students and 3 nuns at a school in Chicago, and there was just no adequate safety measures. The building had been rebuilt with the codes that came about because of the Great Chicago Fire. But there was no school fire safety drills. There was no minimal fire resistive construction. No one understood secondary egress and those type of things. So if you didn't attend last week, you need to go back to Africa Fire Mission's page last week and review that, because that fire prevention in schools is so important. And this is why. When this happened, we were killing students in schools every year. This one got the headlines, got the news stories, and really changed a lot. I think it's something like 40% of schools in the United States after this fire installed fire sprinkler systems, which is amazing. You know, a fire sprinkler system, it's there, it's always ready to put out a fire, it's always on call. It can put out a fire with 7 gallons of water per minute, which I don't know what that equates to liters, but just a fraction of the amount of water that we use to put out a school fire, right? So this fire, though it was extremely deadly, once again we learned from it. We learned that we need to be in these schools. We need to be doing these evacuation drills. We need to make sure that egress routes are open and clear, unlocked. There's nothing blocking the doors, and it made schools install a whole bunch of fire sprinklers afterwards. Um, so the new fire codes, we use the international code system in North America for the most part. There is some that use the NFPA building codes, but they're pretty similar. Those two building codes are. I don't know what each one of you use in your area if you have building codes, but both the NFPA and the international code system, they require you to do a planned fire drill, an announced fire drill within the first 10 days of school. Then they require you to do another fire drill unannounced, and I think that's within the first 3 months of school starting. And those codes come from this fire. After this loss of life, we have never seen a significant loss of life in a school fire since then. I think there's been like ones and twos here and there's, but we used to kill 100 people off in a school fire, and overnight it stopped because of the headlines this fire got. The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire had a lot of similar things when it comes to egress issues that the school fire had. This happened in New York City in 1911, killed 146 factory workers, mostly women, who were sewing these shirts and stuff, right? Before then, there was no workplace safety laws. There was no labor laws. The fire escape access was locked, so they couldn't even access because they didn't want people taking too many breaks. We did learn a lot from this fire as far as workplace safety laws, but a lot of those laws were localized. In the United States, we have OSHA. The OSHA Act came out in 1970. So 60 years after this fire, we finally had like a federal program to oversee workplace safety. Before 1970, we just had local labor laws, but they all kind of did start from this fire, where it's like, hey, if you're going to put workers in danger, you need to provide them with ways to mitigate that danger. Um, we see it in the factories after this fire where their egress routes are open, unlocked, and those type of safety things. We see a lot in the coal mines starting after this, a big push for safety there. But between this fire and 1970 is all like localized pushes. You know, each city or each state would have their own rules. After 1970, it became a federal thing with more oversight at a federal level. So the next fire, we're going to go back to Chicago and talk about another fire. 1903, Iroquois theater fires killed over 600 people in Chicago because of locked exits and flammable scenery. So look how many times already has come up exits. Make sure your egress routes are open. So when you are out doing your fire prevention walks, doing school checks, you know, even if you're at the mall shopping, at a restaurant, eating or whatever, look at your exits, make sure they're open. If they're not open, you can explain to the business owners or whoever, manager or whatever, the reasons why you have to have it open. A lot of them are locked because they're afraid people are going to, rob them and go out the back door or whatever. It's locked for security reasons like that. But we've already talked about 3 or 4 fires here. Total killed a couple thousand people just because the exits were not locked and were not adequate. And we're going to see as we continue today talking about these historical fires, this is the thing that comes up the most. So the other big talking point on this one was the flammable scenery. The fire code, the International Fire Code and the NFPA Fire Code, they both have prescription-based rules in there that will explain what you can have as far as flammability materials on your wall. In schools, you can have almost nothing that's flammable on your wall. And teachers, my wife's a teacher, they love to hang decorations up all over the place. Or kids paint drawings and they love to put those paintings all over the walls, right? They love to display all the artwork. We have to limit that. I think we allow them basically like 10% of the wall space can be covered with something that's flammable, unless there's fire sprinklers in there. Then you can have more. Because this wall coverings have caused tremendous issues in the fire service over the years. And it's still an issue this year. New York City had a fire, and I won't go into all the details of it, but this year New York City had a fire where they get called there for a high-rise fire. They go up into the apartment area where this fire's at, and the walls are literally burning in the hallway. And they have a hard time figuring out what apartment is the fire apartment because the walls are on fire. And then they sent crews up to the roof of the structure to get some ventilation going. And there's fire shooting out the ventilation, which is unusual for them. But what they figured out after the fire was the paint on the wall was oil-based paint, which has been outlawed by fire code for quite a while in New York City. But that oil-based paint had started on fire. So they literally had a tunnel of fire in the hallway, which was very unusual because someone didn't know that fire code and went ahead and painted it anyways. So we're very concerned about what's on the wall, because what's on the wall is going to impact how the fire spreads. Something that's in the vertical position catches on fire much more easy than just something in a horizontal position. Or you just take away that thing altogether and it just won't catch on fire, right? So now we'll shift into a nightclub fire. And we start seeing this trend popping up too. And it continues to this day here and there. This Coconut Grove nightclub fire killed 492 people. It's the deadliest nightclub fire in U.S. history. Um, these patrons, these customers, they went to this nightclub. They wanted to have a good time, whatever, just eat. They don't think about safety when they're going out to eat and going out to have a good time. It's not ingrained into them like it is to us as firefighters, because we've seen the results of this where they just want to go and have a good time. So what caused this issue? Egress. The egresses were inadequate, locked, blocked, the whole works. Flammable decorations. They had palm trees as decorations that caught on fire. They're fake palm trees out of paper or whatever. No fire code enforcement. And this was in 1942. Well, 1977, guess what happens? Here's a Beverly Hills Supper Club in Kentucky, killed 165 people. Overcrowding means the egress can't handle the number of people there. No fire sprinklers. It means that there's that instantaneous reaction isn't there. These fire sprinklers are automatic. It's not like you have to call them and say, hey, bring your truck over here and put this fire out. These fire sprinklers just do it. That's why it's so important if you have a high occupancy load that you do it in buildings to have a fire sprinkler system. And they were way over capacity just to begin with. They would there's no oversight. There's no fire code oversight, no fire marshals or whatever. So they just were overcrowded. And so, like I said, the first one, Coconut Grove, happened in 1942. Then this one's 1977. You think we would learn our lesson after over 30 years of nightclub fires, right? And then even in 2003, we have a major nightclub fire. So how do we keep having these same things? This nightclub fire, the Station nightclub in Rhode Island, the band, you can see the band on the right there. Great White was the name. They let off some pyrotechnics. The pyrotechnics had caught the soundproofing material on fire, and the fire spread. This is the deadliest fire in US history that we have video of it from start to finish. Someone was filming this concert playing with the cell phone. Then that you can see in the video, it's a pretty gruesome video, but you can see in the video the soundproofing catch on fire, and then the fire starts banking down and catching and spreading, right? The person recording the video made it out of this alive. And as the person's going around, part of his video is what you see on the left side here. Those are literally human beings that are wedged into place trying to escape this fire. They're blocking the exit route with their bodies. Too many people tried to use the main door. So I have a degree in Homeland Security Emergency Management. One of my semesters of my degree was psychology. how do people behave during a fire or during an emergency? And we can predict what you're going to do in an emergency very easily, actually. We know that a vast majority of people are going to go to the main exit. If there's an emergency, they're just going to run. And they only know one way to run, and that's the way they came in. A vast majority of people do not identify second exits. A vast majority of people do not take the time to plan escape routes when they're at the mall, when they're at the movie theaters, wherever. They don't think about these things. So when something happens, they're just going to go out the door they came in. So what that does is the building code now requires the main entrance to be bigger, to the point it has to discharge at least 50% of the people from that building. And that is because people are just going to go to the exit they came in. When you go on an airplane, what's one of the first things they tell you? Identify the exits. The closest exit might be behind you. So the way to overcome the psychology of how people are going to behave during emergencies is to train them. And that's what they're doing on the airplane. They are training you, identify your second exit. Because airplanes, you have to discharge 100% of the occupant load through half of the exits in 90 seconds. That's how they determine how many exits they need to install onto an airplane. And they're bringing that type of stuff into the building codes also. Another issue with this fire is the business owner went to the building department of the city and said, hey, I want to install this soundproofing acoustic material because then my concerts will sound better. The building department said, you can't install this, but you can install this one because it's rated for fireproofing. This building didn't have sprinklers in it. So just like we talked about with Coconut Grove, or like we talked about with the schools, if you don't put fire sprinklers in it, you can't put flammable stuff on the walls. The building owner did it anyways. And he ended up spending, I think, 7 years in jail or something like that because of this fire. The interesting thing is, there was this exact same fire that exact same night in Minneapolis. But that building had a fire sprinkler system. The sprinkler system put it out, and no one talks about that. So we can start seeing how, we're I don't know, we're several slides in now. We can see how sometimes we don't learn from our mistakes. Sometimes we're learning from our mistakes, but we don't implement the solution fully, and etc. But we have to remember, as firefighters, we don't just respond to these supper clubs or these school fires, right? We respond to all types of incidents. And this next incident, it's a boiler on one of these ships back during the Civil War of the United States. In the 1800s, the U.S. went to war with itself, North versus South, and this is when this ship was in service. The boiler on this ship exploded, and it killed 1,100 people, mostly Union soldiers, which would be the soldiers of the North of the United States. The South was considered Confederate soldiers because they broke off and made their own nation for a while, right? So it killed 1,100 mostly Union soldiers when this happened. Now, we can sit here and say, well, whatever, it's on a boat, it's a boiler, it's not our issue, right? We're firefighters, we respond to fires. But our mission, our goal in life is to protect life and property. And we try to do it through all hazards, whether it's hazmat, car accidents, fires, whatever, EMS. We just want people to live. That is what firefighting comes down to. So, what did we learn from this? A whole bunch of maritime marine laws, and how to respond to the disasters of that. We learned about boiler safety, making sure you're doing proper inspections on that. In North Dakota, where I live, you have to have your boiler inspected every other year, by the state. They come in and do the inspection. Overcrowding issues. Unfortunately, we didn't learn all the lessons fully. So the Titanic in 1912, when it sailed, it was overcrowded, didn't have enough lifeboats, which led to another 1,000 people there dying roughly. So I just wanted to put this slide in because it throws people off. Like, why did I put in a slide that about a fire that's not really a structure fire? Because we are here to save lives. We'll do it any way we can. You know, we'll do water rescues, tech rescues, we'll do whatever we need to save a life. And prevention is the key to saving these lives. So now we're getting kind of more to a modern era. A lot of these fires we've talked about, they were in the past. Like it wouldn't happen today. I mean, the Station nightclub happened in 2003. We had really modern fire equipment then, and that fire department was on scene within like 4 minutes of that fire starting. Um, and still 100 people died. But here, Las Vegas, 1980, that's a good department. Like they're trained, they're equipped uh, for the standards of the time. But we still lost 85 people due mainly to smoke. Um, if you go to these casinos, they're designed for you to forget about time. There's almost no windows in a casino, and that's so you can't look outside and be like, oh, it's getting dark, I should go home. The slot machines and the poker tables and everything, they're not set up in nice straight lines. They're just kind of all over the place. So when you get up from your slot machine, you can't just take a straight line to the door without running into more places to gamble. And it's set up that way so you spend more money gambling. And there's never clocks in a casino because they want you to stay there for as long as possible. So they do all these little tricks to keep people there. But what happened on this fire is those tricks led to a whole bunch of people inhaling smoke when this MGM Grand Hotel caught on fire. The fire started in the casino area. I think it did spread into the hotel part, if I remember right. But it really showed that when you do all these tricks to make more money, we need fire sprinklers because it's just not easy for people to get up and go out the door anymore, right? If there's an emergency. Um, I wanted to put this fire in because it's really not talked about fire a lot. If you ask many of the firefighters in the United States about the Happy Land Social Club fire, they don't talk about it much. But arson is still a big reason people die. Once again, it goes back to enforced fire codes and open egress routes, but this was an arson fire. And I was a fire marshal for several years, and a fire inspector before that. I did a lot of investigating fires, and it's something that's overlooked in our fire service. It's an afterthought. You know, it takes a lot of training to be a fire investigator. There's a whole bunch of science that goes into it. There's a whole bunch of things you need to know. You need to know about electrical systems, the HVAC systems, sprinkler systems, building construction types, floor coverings, wall coverings, flow paths, like just a whole bunch of the stuff you need to know. And so a lot of these fires don't get talked about. We don't even know they're arson. We just come up with this I don't know what started it attitude. But overall, there's a whole bunch of arson fires that kill people or they cover up crimes. That's another big one we see is crimes that are being covered up. Um, or unfortunately, we do see people killing themselves in an arson fire too. Uh, we had one. It's been a whole bunch of years ago now, probably 12 years ago, um, where he tried to make it look like his furnace exploded. But unfortunately, we figured out he poured a bunch of gasoline in the basement of his house and blew up his house that way with himself in it. If we can start identifying these arson fires or identifying which ones are like suicide and stuff like that, I know it's not the glory of the fire service, right? But that's how we're going to prevent them is by identifying them and researching them. So in this warehouse fire, this is a if you talk to a firefighter in the United States, most of them have heard about this one. Um, this is one of the first fires. You know, a lot of fire departments did pre-fire planning before this fire, but it is after this fire that pre-fire plans came out. Like every department's like, hey, we need to go through these buildings and we need to plan what we're doing. So like last week, I was talking about uh, we had a fire in a factory in my hometown 2 weeks ago. We walk through this building every 3 years or so, get familiar with the layout, get familiar where the hydrants are, that type of stuff. But every fire we've had in that building happened at night. But yet, anytime we walk through that building, we walk through that building during the daytime. It completely changes the dynamic of firefighting when you limit one of your senses. When you take away some of your vision, it changes the dynamic. So in this fire in particular, you can see that it's at night, right? These firefighters got lost in a maze-like structure. And if you go to a lot of these factories, a lot of these warehouses, a lot of the stores, it's kind of a maze. You go to in the United States, we have IKEA. I couldn't imagine if one of those things got ripping because you get a fire ripping through there. It is straight up a maze trying to find your way through that. Um, and that's where these pre-fire plans come from. And I know I've taught classes about pre-fire planning along with Howard and a bunch of our other instructors. So we have the material on Africa Fire Mission's website. You can go through, you can go find some of those trainings about how to do the pre-fire planning, and this is why. Along with this next fire that we talked about, 9 firefighters died in this one. This was a furniture store caught on fire. They think probably from smoking and discarded cigarettes is what it looks like. There is just, and if you, I'm not Charles. I've met a lot of Charleston firefighters, including some survivors of this fire, and they will own up to where their weakness was at this fire, and they will gladly share their stories in order to save the lives of firefighters. So I'm not putting them down when I say this. They didn't understand fire behavior in large commercial structures like this. There was no risk assessments done. There was not an understanding of pump operations and hydraulic operations and how much water you actually need to put out these fires. Um, they were going into these fires with very small pre-connected booster lines, and they would have so many booster lines and hand lines pull off the engine that there's no pressure behind it. Like you see the pictures of the firefighters entering this building before it collapsed, and the hoses are limp because there's not enough pressure on them. And like I said, they'll admit to all this. I'm not throwing them under the bus. They're very eager to share their knowledge with people now. But what we learned from this is we have to understand fire behavior. We have to understand ventilation. We have to understand the risk assessment. Um, and as firefighters, we can't hold this knowledge in. You know, that's why I'm here taking my time to teach you. Because I think by me teaching you that I'm going to keep you guys just a little bit safer. And that I hope that you take this knowledge and pass it on to your crews. In almost all of my presentations, I mentioned something you can do as a company level drill to share this knowledge to other people. And I'm going to show you at the end here a drill that I want you to do um, to share your knowledge, because we all have the knowledge that needs shared. So let's switch a little bit and talk about wildland fires. Can we learn anything from wildland fires? This is the Storm King Mountain fatalities. You talk to any wildland fire in the United States, they know about this fire. Sudden, unexpected fire spread. The the crews lacked situational awareness, or they just lost it. They had it at one time, but they just lost their situational awareness. They focused in on what their task was, what their mission was. And then they didn't have anyone doing lookouts. Their escape routes got overrun with fire pretty quickly. We see this a lot in wildland fires and with structure fires. You go to work and you just do your task. You can't see the big picture because you're holding the end of the nozzle, right? This is why command is so important. And this is why having safety officers on scene is important. Someone that looks at the big picture. Um, as a commander, you're in charge of the whole scene. You're not worried about this nozzle and how much water it's putting out and where to put the water. You're looking at the big picture and how many more fire trucks you need to get or whatever the case might be. So when structure fires, our instant commanders will look out, or safety officers to look out. Wildland fires, you need to have a designated lookout, several designated lookouts. This crew was working this mountain here, and they should have had to work lookout, but all the other crews should have had their own lookout also. So I'm going to speed things up a little bit just so I can get to the end. 2013, almost an identical issue to this last fire we've talked about. So once again, we need to keep reinforcing these lessons learned, and continue as new generations of firefighters come on to the fire ground. We need to teach them so they don't have to learn it the hard way. When I joined the fire department in 2004, there's something that was never ever talked about and still not talked about today is when you get to the fire station, especially as a volunteer, when you get to the fire station, you see someone else show up and you're like, okay, we got this because Rod showed up. For me, it was Rod Robinson. When I got to the fire hall, Rod Robinson was there. I was good. He was going to take care of me. We were going to, it didn't matter how big the fire was, how bad the car accident was, we could handle it. We could go put out the fires of hell, literally, because he was there. He had the knowledge and the experience behind him, and he brought comfort to the entire fire scene. Well, what they don't tell you when you first start off in the fire service is someday you're going to be that guy, and you don't know it. It just happens sometime. And I don't know when it happened for me was, but I've noticed a lot of the newer members when we're on fire scenes, they gather around me to try to get my opinion on how we should tackle this problem, right? And I hope I can teach them the next lesson, all the lessons I've learned, and then they can take what I learned and teach it to the next group of firefighters, right? That's the goal. The Hackensack Ford fire, I recommend you guys do some research on this. It's really about this bowstring truss roof design. This is engineered really strong. It can take a lot of weight. In my area, we get a lot of snow. That snow lands on the roof, it weighs it down. You could have issues, but this can handle a really good load. It's a really good design, actually, for strength while using minimal materials also. But the issue is when you burn away any one of these parts, then it loses its strength really quickly and it just collapses in a domino effect. So I definitely want you to learn some more about building construction. We have these this one, the last one, this one, and the next one are all about building construction. We've taught a whole bunch of classes on building construction, so I'm going to go through this pretty fast. But go back and review those classes for these fires. Because this is 2017, killed 72 people based on some building construction, mainly the material used for building construction. In 2019, we destroyed a big part of the Notre Dame Cathedral. So I want to also learn lessons from not just the United States. I want to learn lessons from everywhere, right? And that's a very historic building that got repaired, luckily, but it'll never truly be the same building. So we're going to transition a little bit here. This next fire is unique. I can promise that very few firefighters in the United States have heard about this fire, but it's extremely important. At least to me, it was. So the From T-shirt shot fire in 2007. It destroyed 3 businesses, took 22 fire departments to put out. Right before this photo was taken, I was standing in this doorway. There wasn't any fire there. A lot of heavy smoke coming because he had all the ink, all the T-shirts in there, creating a lot of heavy smoke. I was entering this structure and I paused. I was on the nozzle. Eric Wint was behind me. And I paused because I felt water hitting the back of my neck. And I said, what's going on? And I looked up and I could see a ladder truck spraying water onto this roof system. Well, this roof hadn't collapsed yet. So they were spraying water onto a roof, and that roof was supporting all the weight of that water that caused the roof to collapse just seconds before I was entering this building. I was literally on this threshold right here when that roof collapsed. And it pushed me back out into the street, the force of the collapse did. Burnt the side of my neck up. And that's why I'm so passionate about training. The department using that aerial device, they they were not properly trained on when to use aerial devices. They were putting water onto a roof that couldn't support the weight of the water. And the water had no way to reach the fire. There's no point for them to do that. I had no business even attempting to enter the structure at that time with the limited training I had. I'd entered a lot of fires before this, but this fire is way out of what my knowledge level was. I was just a small town Iowa firefighter, and I could do anything. Just give me a nozzle, I'll put a fire out, right? And that's not the way we fight fires. So this fire is why I'm so passionate about training. Interstate 80 motor vehicle accident. This was my friend. He was on the fire department with me in 2011. The morning he died, him and we had a charity auction down at the fire station. Him and I, being the strong guys of the fire department, we're the people that got to lift everything and load it in the back of the trucks. We were pretty sore that day. But if you knew Mike's background, he didn't come from a good background. He came from a hard lifestyle, but he is extremely proud to be a firefighter. And it was a badge of honor for him. And to see him grow and to see him just be an outstanding citizen before his death was amazing. He really became a role model for his kids and stuff. But he died pretty young. So, and this last one is a real important one to me. We just always have to remember that we are blessed to have this job. This girl, she didn't get injured in the car accident or anything. I opened up the door to the van that she was in, and I was the fire chief at the time. And I said, "Hey, you want to come for a ride with me?" And she jumped into my arms. We gave her that little teddy bear and a quarter, and she drew me a picture of me. Anyway, so she drew a picture of me. This is what I looked like back in 2000. I think this was 10. This is what I looked like back then, apparently. This girl, she's probably out of high school by now, I assume. I haven't talked to her ever since then. But it's these small moments that really make this job amazing. And as you go through your career in the fire service, this is what I want you to do. Like I said, I was going to challenge you to come up with company level drills. I want you to go back to your firefighters and ask them what fires, if they were building this slideshow, what fires would they put in? What fires are important to them? It could be fires that they were on, it could be fires they learned about through school or whatever. But I want you today to go back to your crews and ask you what fires should be in this slideshow. So, having said that, let me go back. Is there any questions? I don't know how to go back actually. Oh, you have to hit this button. Haven't been paying attention to the chat. Has any questions come up? Comments?
I don't have any questions in the chat yet, but we're going to open the floor up here for questions. You can use the raise hand feature. You can just set things up so you can unmute yourself if you'd like. You can drop a question in the chat, use the raise hand feature. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Floor's open. We're going to keep things open for questions here, but let me just sort of wrap up the formal portion of our training as we approach the top of the hour here. A great class, there's always that saying that those that, if you don't learn from history, it tends to repeat itself, right? And I'm sure that uh, in all the places that you're from, there's some examples of that that you can think of where folks haven't learned from the from lessons from the past, right? So it's really important to study some of these historical fires. Brian was covering a bunch of these sort of historical fires from the U.S., but what about where you're at? What kind of history do you guys have? Is there are there some fires that made changes where you're at? And that's what he's encouraging you to do, is to figure those, to see what those are, to see what you can learn from them, and prevent that history from repeating itself. So, thanks, Brian. That's an excellent job there with the class today. Brian's going to join us again next week, where he's going to be doing sort of dual duty. He's going to be hosting and teaching class for next week. So, invite you all to join us again. Thank you to all of you out there for taking your time and your bundles to educate yourself so that you can better serve your community. It doesn't go unnoticed, and we're very appreciative for all of you. If you've got the time, please stick around for tea time. Otherwise, we hope to see you all again next week.